Hello, thank you for joining. Thanks so much for sticking around in spite of the delay today and the delay in it being Friday and not Wednesday. So I was on Wednesday when I usually do this. I was actually summoned for jury duty. I got the summons about a month ago, and last week, Friday, so a week ago today, I had to call in to court to see if I would actually have to appear in person on Monday. And I did. I had to appear in person this Monday morning. And when I did, I was selected to a jury panel in a criminal trial. And out of that jury panel, I was chosen as one of the jurors, and the case was set for this entire week. And I was unable to do the live on Wednesday as I normally do. Now, I will make a separate video, just a freestanding video, not part of the What's New Wednesdays, about my experience with that because it was fascinating. It was my first time serving as a juror. I thought it was very insightful. And especially as I've been following the Murdoch murder trial in South Carolina, and our case and the Murdoch case coming to a close in the same week this week, I found it especially fascinating. And I love the jury trial system that we have here in the US. All countries do not have that. In fact, very few countries do. Germany, for instance, where I was born, does not have jury trials. They only have bench trials. So I really enjoyed that experience, and I want to make a video just about that. So I'm hoping to record that later today and hopefully have it up tomorrow or maybe by Sunday. So if that's something you're interested in, now that I'm no longer under the admonition as a juror, I'm allowed to talk about it. So if that's something you're interested in, look for that video in the coming days. Now, I just want to make sure, can everybody hear me? Yes, Sarah, I'm sorry. I had it all figured out, but the dishes had to be started. I had to finish that, and then the baby needed me, and one thing led to another. Can you all hear me is my big question. I'm going to type it here. Yes. Okay. Good. Okay. That was my one question I was waiting for. So thank you for joining. Now, for those of you who are joining for the first time, I do these live streams every week on Wednesdays at 1:15-ish. I don't think I've started at 1:15 yet. There's always something that comes up. Originally I planned it for 1 and then it always ended up being 1:15. So I moved it back to 1:15 and now it ends up being like 1:20, 1:25. I don't know why. It just always something comes up. So I know I could do better and I really need to do better. But it does happen every Wednesday, unless I'm just providentially hindered, which I believe this was the first time that happened. I think they've all been on Wednesday. Yes, they have. Yes. So I do this every week, and I talk a little bit about what's going on in our personal lives, and then I talk a little bit about a certain topic. So some upcoming topics that have been suggested that we will be talking about. Somebody asked about like homemakers and stay-at-home moms and maybe the discontent that they might be feeling. One moment. The discontent maybe, or the feeling of, is this really fair, that one might feel as a stay-at-home wife, stay-at-home mom, homemaker, full-time homemaker. So that's one topic that we have coming up. Another topic that has been requested is sleeping arrangements for babies, specifically co-sleeping, and that topic. And then, of course, I take suggestions. So if anybody would like to see something covered, I would very much welcome you either contacting me through YouTube, or if you have my email, The email address to reach me at for the videos is aretheyallyoursblog@gmail.com. So you can email me at that if you have a topic suggestion. So anyhow, this last week, our family was dealing with, I think the whole country had this, some kind of a stomach. It's not a virus, it's bacterial. I read in the news which specific bacteria it is, but it went through our entire family and it went through our entire church. And I mean, it's in the news. It must be going through the whole entire country. So it's basically like it starts out as nausea, maybe vomiting, and then, that whole, like food poisoning basically, but not foodborne. So last week on Thursday, so 8 days ago now, the first of our kids came down with it. And then we pretty much had one or two people sick every day. I mean, even today, some of us are still on the tail end of it because it lasts. The worst part of it lasts, I mean, for me, it only lasted like I was really nauseous on Sunday. I was nauseous from like noon till like 10 o'clock at night. And after that, I felt a lot better. But I still, every time I ate, I would get nauseous again for like 2 or 3 days after that. So the worst was only 4. Pretty much kept us busy this past week. And between that and having jury duty all week, I decided to just take this week off from schoolwork. And when I say all week, the courts, or the Superior Court in Maricopa County anyway, does not meet on Friday. So when they say all week, it's Monday through Thursday, which is why I rescheduled the live for today. My daughters, thankfully, my oldest daughters did not get it, or maybe they had it really mildly. So they were able to hold down the fort even while I was gone. They did a great job with that. But that was basically the update for this week, as we made it through. And everybody is slowly on the mend. Now we have a child who's developing a severe cough because it is incredibly cold in Arizona. I mean, by incredibly cold, I mean there are today parts of the valley, and when I say the valley, what we call the greater Phoenix metropolitan area, there are parts of the valley that are having snow today, and there's snow in Tucson yesterday. So that to us is incredible and unheard of. That's really rare. And it's not snowing in the city, but like the mountains on the outskirts of the city are getting snow, as opposed to, the mountains an hour or two away. And up in the mountains, 2 and 3 hours north of us and much higher parts of Arizona, the winter storms have pretty much shut down all roads. The freeways that are east to west, the freeways that are north to south, the little highways connecting them in between. It has been incredible. Just 2 feet of snow in one night, and that's just been coming down all week long like crazy. So down here it's cold. And I think that more of my kids might be getting a cold if it continues like this, because I don't know what it is today. I think it's in the 50s right now, but at night it's been really cold and rainy, lots of rain, lots and lots of rain. So for it being March, sometimes in March we can go out and it can be sweltering and sunburn and unbearable, but this March is cold. We are still in closed-toe shoes and long tops. So that's how cold it is. But anyway, that kind of ties in nicely with the topic. Today's topic, I wanted to talk about healthcare, and specifically health insurance, I guess. It's not so much healthcare, health insurance, I should say. Now, if you are not from the United States, then this will probably not make any sense to you. The health insurance system in the United States is unique from anywhere else I've ever had health insurance in other parts of the world. And the reason for that is that it's not entirely private, but it's also not government owned and run. It's kind of like the worst of both worlds. When you have a country that has universal health care like Germany does and like Europe does, and I believe all European countries have universal health care. There are many downsides to that. I'm not at all advocating for universal health care. I'm not a fan of that at all. But when that happens, basically the medical rates are generally lower than they are here in the US. kind of like if you think of in the US, if you think of Medicaid, the part that the government pays, Medicaid pays far less for medical care and medical procedures than private insurances do, because they say, well, these are the Medicaid rates, take it or leave it, that's all we're willing to pay. And then only the health insurance companies that are willing to accept that amount will then work with those patients. Pardon me. So when you have a country that has universal health care, their rates are generally lower. In fact, in 2019, when I flew to Germany with Peter and Solomon, I had to go to the emergency room while I was there. And the entire visit, they invoiced me for it. And I was like, really, guys, this is it? It ended up being like 62 euros or maybe 67 euros. And that was for, from the time they took me in until the time they dismissed me and wrote the prescription. And I mean, I think for the prescription, I paid a few euros at the pharmacy. So, pardon me. When you have universal health insurance, at least there's a benefit of the government pays really badly because they squander all the money. So at least if you do have to pay because you're from out of country or whatever, it's not as expensive. Or if it's all private insurance, then maybe we could have some competition. It could be open for people to maybe bid or it being visible. But here we kind of have this weird hybrid where the government messes with it, but they really just mess it up. Now, in the United States, it is legal to not carry medical insurance. Seems like a no-brainer, but a few years ago in Obamacare, it was illegal to not sign on for health insurance. You were forced to sign on for health insurance. The reasoning being that it would make everybody's insurance cheaper. Now, those who at that time had health insurance before Obamacare, and then the mandate came along, and then other people had to join, it didn't bring the prices down. You would think with more participants, everybody's price would go down. No, prices skyrocketed. That's pretty much when in the US we went from paying $400 or $500 a month for a family to have health insurance to now we're seeing easily $1,200 and $1,500 a month for a family to get health insurance. So that didn't help at all. But thankfully, the mandate was overturned and health insurance is not mandatory in the United States. We have not had health insurance for our family, commercial health insurance, since we still lived in California. It was before we moved to Indiana, so it would have been pre-2003. I think when we moved to Indiana in 2003 is when I discontinued. My husband had health insurance benefits at his job in California, so from when we got married in 2000 until we moved to Indiana in 2003. And I was initially on there as his beneficiary, as was Solomon, who had been born by that time, as well as Isaac. But the company that he worked for only paid for him, and myself and our kids, we had to pay the premium. And that cost more through his employer than for us to just buy insurance independent of his job. So my husband had his policy through work, and myself and the kids had a policy that we just privately paid for, Blue Cross Blue Shield of California. And that was until 2003. In 2003, we moved to Indiana so we could go to Bible college. And that's when we stopped health insurance, and was kind of like, we kind of had to wrap our minds around that. Like I think we initially felt like, wow, we're really taking a gamble here. Like something really catastrophic could happen to us. And then how could we pay? Now that we have been without insurance for 20 years, that's not a concern of mine at all. It is so much better to not have health insurance in the United States. And that's kind of what I wanted to talk about today, to remove that fear and to explain to you what your options are when you do not have health insurance. Now, there are benefits to not having health insurance. And of course, then there are the downsides. So let me talk about this. And I'm not an expert on this. I'm not an insurance broker. I'm definitely not a medical professional. So this is just my personal opinion. Take it with a grain of salt and, maybe get the opinion of somebody who believes the exact opposite of me, so that you can, between those two viewpoints, form an informed, intelligent decision for yourself. So, personally, I believe that the benefits of not having insurance is that it's actually a lot cheaper. And I will go into more detail because that's the exact opposite of what you're usually told. But even in our large family, it is a lot cheaper to not carry insurance. It is also a lot faster to get healthcare, and you can get better healthcare because you do not need to wait until your primary care physician can give you an appointment with a specialist who might be backed up until kingdom come. You can just go straight to the specialist because you're paying the specialist. Your money's green. They prefer cash patients over insurance patients because they get paid right away. They don't have to have staff invoicing insurance and going back and forth with them and collecting paperwork. It's just here you go, you pay, you're done. That's it. So you get better care because you can go to any provider. If there is a particular pediatric surgeon that's better than another, or if there's a pediatric orthopedic specialist that's like known for being really, really good, but your insurance company doesn't take him, you can't go to him unless you want to pay out of pocket on top of already paying your health insurance, of course. So you have access to any medical provider and you get seen sooner. So those are the benefits. I believe you get better care and faster care, but also it actually ends up being cheaper. Now, the downside is that you have to do paperwork, especially if you want to negotiate a discount or if you want to educate yourself ahead of time about maybe the costs of drugs at various pharmacies. There's a little bit of paperwork there to do, not much. I would think it's still easier than dealing with insurance, but that's the only downside that I can think of. Now, there are also health insurance alternatives, and those are like Medishare programs. And there are a lot of Christian Medishare programs. So I will say that for the last, I don't know, maybe 8 years, yes, 8 years, because it was after Boaz was born, we have been part of Samaritan Ministries, and they just happened to send me their little pamphlet because I guess somebody signed up who said that we had referred them. I don't remember referring anybody, but somebody might have done it from, me having recommended years ago. So I got the little pamphlet. It's Samaritan Ministries. And basically, Samaritan Ministries is not a health insurance. We are still legally considered uninsured, and we are. And basically, that after we have a medical incident and we've paid everything and everything's been taken care of, we can take our costs and we can submit them to other members, and it will be shared amongst other members, and they will send us checks personally made out to us to help cover our medical expenses. And by that same token, we send shares to other members. So I think there are like, I don't know how many, tens of thousands of member families at this time. And basically, we send them money when they have a medical need. And I only send one check per month. And when we have a need, other members send us their monthly check for that month. So it's kind of like a clearinghouse. Samaritan Ministries is basically just the organization and the clearinghouse that says, okay, you have this need, and you send it to him, and he sends it to you, and they just reshuffle. But basically, everybody each month has a set amount that they will send to somebody to pay for somebody's medical need. But it really doesn't change the conversation about not having insurance because, number one, we still are considered uninsured. And number two, for our family, even in our very large family, it's Samaritan Ministries has not saved us any money. The monthly share we pay is so large that at best we're cutting even. And I eventually guess we probably maybe even are paying a little bit extra. But it's just that peace of mind that should something major come up, I guess, then we kind of, even though we break even, rather than maybe going a year without any expensive bill and then having a year with a very large medical bill, as opposed to every month paying our current share, which is right around $700. When we first started, it was $399, and over the years it's gone up. So it's right around $700, maybe $718 now, because we have the largest tier family and we have the highest level of coverage. So I will go more into the benefits of being part of a Medishare later at the end of this video, because there are particular benefits to that as well. But as far as not having the insurance, let's talk about the cost. So even when we were not part of Samaritan and we did not have health insurance, we have, of course, had major medical expenses. Our children have been to the hospital on various occasions. Um, One of our sons had to go to the hospital and stay as an inpatient because of asthma. Another child had to have a hospital stay because of an allergic reaction to a bee sting. We have had, for myself, when I was pregnant with Boaz, so that was 9 years ago. Um, he he was a twin. He is a twin, and there were several complications surrounding that pregnancy that required surgery in the womb, not on any of the babies, but just on twin to twin transfusion syndrome. And what they do is that the blood vessels of the two babies connect, and it harms both of them. So basically, what the laser surgery that is available now does is that it separates their blood vessels back to how it should be, to where they're not connected, and it just makes it to where they each have their own blood supply again, the way it was initially intended, and that way, it doesn't harm either child. So there's that. And then I had a second surgery in utero for when my water broke prematurely. They were able to patch that. That was like an experimental surgery. So you can imagine how expensive those were. In fact, I don't know the exact figure of how much it was before the cash pay discounts, but it was six figures. It was like $120,000 between the two surgeries, I believe. And don't quote me on that. I'm not sure because it's been so long now, but it was a significant amount. So the first thing you have to realize is that the rates that a hospital or a doctor quotes you are not, those are the insurance rates. Those are not what you will pay as what is called a cash patient or a self-pay patient. So when I go to the doctor, I tell them I'm self-pay. And even way back, I needed MRIs when one time my foot was broken at Walmart. One of their workers just dropped a wooden loaded pallet onto my foot. I was standing against a cooler and he just drove this thing up, didn't see me because I was here and he was here, and he drove the pallet and he just dropped it on my foot. And they had to do some MRIs on my foot. So when I was calling around for an MRI, they said it's $1,200 an image. And I said, oh, okay, well, I'm self-pay. And they're like, oh, that's $400 an image. So only one third, and that's typical. That, I would say, the average rate by which a self-pay cash price is cheaper than the insurance price is two-thirds, 67%. So much so that here in Phoenix, the Banner hospitals automatically, if you go in as a cash patient, a self-pay patient, automatically, without you having to make a single phone call or anything, when they send you the hospital bill, they have the total, and then they put a 67% self-pay discount on, and the initial amount that they even start to try to get from you is only one third of the insurance amount. So part of the reason why people think that it is impossible to pay for healthcare unless you have insurance is because they don't realize that the prices they are looking at are the insurance prices, not the self-pay prices. Now, in negotiating the discount, that is left up to each individual hospital and each individual doctor. Doctors typically do not give as hefty of a discount as the hospital will. With hospitals, I've had anywhere from 67 to 91% of a discount. With doctors, typical is 20 to 40%. Although I guess I've seen even higher than that. Pardon me for a moment. Sorry, my kid's in the background, and sometimes they need me. It's like that's almost why I live here. So that's the first thing. Realize that the price that they put out there is not what you will pay. Now, there is a really great resource tool, and it's called the Healthcare Blue Book. And it's called that because it's kind of a, I guess, not a spin-off, but it's similar to the Kelly's Blue Book, which the Kelly's Blue Book is to determine the value of vehicles, motor vehicles. Kelly's Blue Book will kind of give you like, this is what you can expect in your area with your kind of vehicle and those amount of miles and your vehicle being in this condition. This is what you can expect to get for that vehicle, and it'll give you a range. You know, in the private market, you can sell it from here to this much. At a dealership, you might be able to get anywhere from here to here. So the Healthcare Blue Book, and you can just Google that Healthcare Blue Book. You can put in what procedure you need, and it will, for your zip code, bring up physicians, not every physician, because not every physician puts their prices out there, but it will at least make it possible for you to see many, many physicians and see their price range to give you an idea of how much it will cost. So that's a great tool, because by demystifying medical costs and making it competitive, like, well, I'm going to go to this guy rather than that guy, that really brings in the competition and brings the prices down. It's kind of like a Google review, you know. Before, I don't know what we ever did before Google reviews. You were just at the mercy of going to a crummy restaurant and not finding out until you got there that it was crummy. Now we have the reviews. So the Healthcare Blue Book kind of helps us to get a provider in the right price range, or to get an idea of what a certain procedure will cost. And another great resource for medications is GoodRx, goodrx.com. And on goodrx.com, you can type in what medication you're looking for and the prescription, you know, 100 milligrams or whatever, and the quantity that was prescribed to you. And it will come back with all the pharmacies in your area, CVS, Walgreens, you know, the Albertsons pharmacy, whatever. And it will tell you how much it will cost at each pharmacy to fill your exact prescription. And it will vary greatly. I mean, I've seen it to where one pharmacy wanted $14 for a prescription that another pharmacy was charging like $200 for. So you can, and it's not always the same one that's cheap. It's not always, well, the Walmart pharmacy is going to be cheapest, or, you know, CVS is going to be cheapest. No, it really depends on the drug, and you can find it on there, and then you just get your drug prescribed or pick it up from that pharmacy. So that's what I mean by it's a little bit more work, but you save so much more money. And of course, there's also the enjoyment of knowing that you did save money. It's kind of like a bit of a treasure hunt. So as far as the cost, you really do not have to be afraid of the cost of not having insurance, unless, of course, you have major medical issues. None of us have any chronic illnesses. We've only ever dealt with acute things. And even in the case of acute things, so with the pregnancy with Boaz, where I had to have surgery in utero twice, between both procedures, it came out to be just under $40,000, I want to say. I want to say the first one was about $23,000, and then the second one was a little bit less. And I think it came out with anesthesia and hospital and everything. It came out to just under $40,000, if I remember right. I might have my numbers completely wrong. And that was a cash price. It would have been about 3 times that much for insurance price. And mind you, not all insurance paid for these procedures, because like the second procedure was experimental, so health insurance didn't pay for that anyway, even if you had insurance. So if you wanted your child to live, and we did these surgeries because it was the best opportunity for both babies to survive. Unfortunately, the littler baby still succumbed to an unrelated issue just because he had a marginal cord insertion. In fact, it wasn't even marginal. It was going into a vein that was, the placenta was, he only had a very small share of the placenta, only about 10, 15% of it. And his cord was not even going into a share of the placenta. It was going into a vein that was going to the placenta. So even though we made it through those 2 hurdles, by the time I got to be 20 weeks along and the babies really started growing, it just was not enough to sustain him, and unfortunately passed away in the womb. But Those surgeries were the best chance to make sure that he could make it. And it didn't work, but for people, many times they are successful. In our case, we were only given about a 20% chance of it being successful, 15-20% chance of it actually having an outcome of both babies surviving, just because the little guy was, there were those other issues. But a lot of people, even with insurance, their insurance would not pay for those procedures and they would still end up paying for them. So even with something as big as that and as expensive as that, if you take a step back, let me tell you how much insurance would cost for our family. And I know this both from when I've looked into it in years past, and more recently, I looked into it early last year. So in early 2022, we were considering offering health insurance as a benefit to the employees of our church. We have a total of 4 employees, and we were considering offering health insurance as one of their benefits. So I got in touch with an insurance agent, an independent insurance agent, who ran me quotes on, I think, the 5 or 3 biggest providers in the state. I know one was Blue Cross Blue Shield, one was Aetna, and I forget what the other one was. So 3. And basically, there's a choice between a PPO and an HMO. And the difference with a PPO is that with a PPO, you're a little bit more free to pick your own doctor. With a PPO, basically they say, well, you can go to anybody you want, but we will only pay the full amount or a large amount of people that we're networked with, that we're contracted with. You can go to others, but if you go to other doctors outside our network, we'll only pay 50%, which is better than an HMO, because on an HMO, you can only stay in network. So HMO standing for a health maintenance organization, they kind of have more of a focus of go to your checkup, go to this, go to that, and you're stuck with us only. And if the doctor that you want to see is not in our network, well, tough luck. With a PPO, you can go to other doctors, but they might pay a smaller percentage of your bill. So the PPO offers more freedom, and because of that, we wanted to go the PPO route, and we chose the best coverage, where for all the preventative, like the exams and stuff like that, they would cover 100%. And then for actual treatment, they were deductibles and co-payments. And basically what it turned out to be is that what this agent came back at me with for 4 employees, the annual policy for all 4 employee families was going to be over $60,000. It was like $68,000. So approximately $18,000 per family. And for this $18,000 premium per family, so that's like $1,500 a month, $1,400 a month per family. So about double of what we currently pay for Samaritan. Okay, this is my husband, so I'm going to answer this time. This is the second time beeping in 1 month. So about $1,400 per family per month. And what would they get for the $1,400? What would it buy them? And that's about what they would pay if that's what I'd been quoted in the past. If we were to get insurance for our family privately, we're looking at about $1,400 to $1,500 a month. What would they get for that? Well, for one, they would first have to meet a deductible. I want to say it was like $7,500 per person, up to about $18,000 per year for the whole family. So until that was paid, the insurance didn't even pay anything. And once that was met, they would cover 100% of in-network and 50% of out-of-network. So basically, in addition to our church spending per family per month $1,500, $68,000 or so for the year, each family would also first have to meet, it was $15,500 per family or something like that, or per member, like $6,500 per member, but it was only like the family was like basically the equivalent of 3 members. Once they had each paid that, which was somewhere between it was around 18,000 per family, then the insurance would start paying. So not only would we be paying the premium, but they would be having to pay their deductible, and they would be having to pay their co-payments. Co-payments when you go to the doctor. Every time you go to the doctor, I mean, it was I think those are a $50 co-payment, and for the if you go to the emergency room, it's like a $400 co-payment. So basically, they would have been paying exactly double of what we currently pay for Samaritan. And as I've already said, Samaritan is not even saving us money. It's just we're breaking even, and it's kind of predictable that each month it's easier to budget for, is why we have it. So the health insurance market, because of the pricing, is a total scam. Because I submit to you that those that have health insurance, like let's say we had gone with that PPO, and let's say that the deductible had been met, but the families still have to pay 50% for an out-of-network provider. I submit to you that the 50% for an out-of-network provider, or the 25% for the in-network provider that you have to pay until you meet your, max for the year, I submit to you that that is still more than what we pay just being a cash patient. Because being a cash patient, like I already explained, for hospitals, the most I pay for the hospital is about 33%. So that's a 67% discount. So having a health insurance, I'll pay for 50% after I pay them through the nose for a premium. That still ends up being more expensive. And when we go to the urgent care and they have to pay at the emergency room $400, even with insurance, after paying these insane premiums and co-payments and deductions, and then people think that here I walk up, I'm a cash patient, I end up paying less for my cash price to be there than they are paying for their copay to be there. And it is just a huge, ridiculous financial nightmare. So much so that some patients, even when they have insurance because they get it from their job, just like they use GoodRx pricing to just pay for their medication outside of health insurance, just because the GoodRx price is cheaper than telling them I have insurance and then paying the reduced insurance price. Just like that, some people are just seeing the doctor, even though they have health insurance. Maybe they don't have to pay for the premium because it's through their job. So even when the job pays their premium, because the deduction and the copay would be based on the insurance price, and even that fraction of it would still be more than the cash price. So that many people with insurance, when they do go to the doctor, say that they're self-paying a cash price because it still ends up being cheaper. So I can't explain why the prices are the way they are, except the government interference. And I'm guessing a lot of healthcare being overinflated, especially with all the psychotherapy, people being crazy things. I think that's really inflated the cost of healthcare. And one of the things that I like about Samaritan is that Samaritan does not pay for any of that. If you want any of those resources, that's excluded from it. This is just for medical needs that you have that are physical, biological medical needs. And it is also only open for Christians. You actually have to have a pastor, your pastor, sign off on your application that you go to church every week. That is actually in the application. That you are a regular member in good standing of a local New Testament Christian church, and that you do not drink alcohol, that you are living inside, that you're either single, adult, or that you are married. You cannot be living in fornication. They specifically ask about that. You cannot be living in fornication to be a member. In order to be a member, you kind of have to live a conservative life where you are either an adult who is single and living on his own, or, a married adult. You cannot be living in fornication. You cannot be drinking. You do have to be a member of a church in good standing. And just with those few criteria, it shockingly greatly reduces the need for medical care, because you are living a much healthier, safer life. And then, of course, there's some things that they do not cover. They do not cover any birth control, abortion, anything like that. They do not cover any of the psychobabble care, things like that. Any of those medications are excluded. And I'm not saying that maybe there isn't a place for them sometimes, but they exclude that. And that's stated at the beginning, so you know what you're getting into. So they'll take care of your broken bones. They'll do all sorts of things. And the wonderful thing about Samaritan is that they actually cover a lot of treatments that might be considered alternative. So in the case of pregnancy, they cover up to 40 chiropractic adjustments per pregnancy. So that's one per week. And they will reimburse for that. They will reimburse for prenatal vitamins, or really any supplement that your midwife or doctor prescribes. Even if it's just take Floridex for iron, even natural supplements that no health insurance company would pay for. And even some alternative treatments. One of my children, my oldest son, Solomon, had COVID back in 2020. I think it was in late 20 or early 21 that he got COVID. And as a result of COVID, he completely and utterly lost his sense of smell. And I do mean completely. He could not smell anything. He could taste, but he could not smell anything for well over a year. And during this time, this weighed really heavy on my mother's heart, of course. I was concerned that it could put him in a dangerous situation at work if he can't smell noxious fumes, or he has to solder. Sometimes he's around open fire. If something was burning, he couldn't smell it. He had gas in his apartment, natural gas on the stove. And I was really worried about this. And so I would suggest here and there, hey, I heard that such and so might help, or this and that might help. And he tried some natural things. He tried some conventional things like a sprayed steroid, tried all sorts of things, and nothing worked over the course of almost a year and a half. And I was reluctant to suggest anything because, it was kind of sad and frustrating if it didn't work. I didn't want to just keep making it worse, but it was really starting to get to him, because he's a runner. He runs ultra marathons and marathons, and he likes to run in the forest and on trails. And he said, I haven't smelled a forest in over a year. And I found that really sad. But it was in April last year, April 2022, that through groups on Facebook that talk about such loss of smell, we're talking about a procedure called a Stellate ganglion block, SGB, being successful to treat post-COVID distorted smells. Had limited success with loss of smell, anosmia, but was fairly successful with parosmia. And I myself had parosmia the whole pregnancy with Oliver, because I'd had it after COVID, and then it came back when I was pregnant with him, and then I got COVID while I was pregnant with him. So to this day, I have a very distorted sense of smell from that. But Solomon's was actually just completely gone. So I learned about the Stellate ganglion block, which is actually usually used for nerve pain, but had been found to be effective for this, but is definitely not the way that it's intended to be used. Like it's an off-label use for that. A lot of people who have had the procedure done, their insurance would not cover for it. It was not coverable. And I ran it by Samaritan Ministries, and they said, well, if you can get a doctor to attest to the fact that it's not available in your state and that he would benefit from this procedure, then yes, we will cover it. And I said, well, he doesn't have a doctor. And they said, well, does he have a chiropractor? And they accepted the note from our family chiropractor. And it is available in Arizona, but the clinic that has had really great success rates is out of state in Utah. And she said, she explained that in her letter. And Samaritan not only covered the procedure, which virtually no health insurance company does for this particular use, but they paid the travel expenses. They reimbursed us for hotels, for gas, and for food because he had to go out of state for this. So they are so much better than health insurance would ever be because you're actually dealing with the real life humans who have a soul, who are fellow believers, and it's just so much superior. And when I was 9 months pregnant with Oliver, at the beginning of May in 2022, Solomon and I went to Utah for him to have this treatment, and it was fully covered by Samaritan, and they even cover the travel expenses. So I'm very much a fan of Samaritan Ministries. Solomon at the time was not living at home, so he has his own membership separate from us. He pays the young adult rate, young single adult rate, which his is $172 a month, I want to say. So even them covering that, that covered like a year's worth of premiums. And before that, he'd had some other procedure done. He has a deviated septum that had to be fixed. That was like $4,000 or $5,000. They paid for that. So they covered that. And I don't think any health insurance would have done that. So I'm a fan of Samaritan. I'm not saying you have to have a health insurance alternative, but if you do, we have been with them for 8 years, and I'm really, really happy with how they handle things. Did it work? Yes, it did. And that has been one of the greatest answers of prayer in my life. And it worked, and it has continued to work. And he was able to have a sense of smell restored. And they didn't give him a good chance because, like I said, he had loss of smell, not distorted smell. And for loss of smell, it only works in like 20% of cases. And initially, it was very difficult because, like I said, I was apprehensive to even suggest it. Because if it doesn't work, that's so depressing. This is kind of like the last thing that we hadn't tried yet. And I was like, if this doesn't work, that's going to be really depressing. So when he initially had they do two sides. And when they did the one side, his symptoms got worse immediately after the procedure. And I was so depressed. I thought, this is horrible. I just dragged him out of state, and he had to lay out all the money, until Samaritan members reimbursed him for it. And I was like, this is horrible. It was really depressing. But within a few hours, it started improving. And by the next morning, he actually was able, that evening, that at dinner that evening, he was able to smell something that he hadn't been able to smell at all. I mean, he had not been able to smell anything, and he was able to smell something. And then by the morning, it was even better. He got the second side done. And after that, we started heading back to Arizona, and he started being able to smell more and more. And within 2 weeks, probably 90% of his sense of smell had returned, and then it came back completely. So I've been meaning to make a separate video about that because it is a very experimental procedure for that. And from a first person experience, or I guess I'm the second person experience, I'm really happy that it worked for him. And yes, it did work, but Samaritan paid for that. So going back to the health insurance thing, I don't think the health insurance would have, just from other people and other groups. I know that they wouldn't have. And it was just wonderful. We were able to get the cash discount price at the clinic. And when it was all said and done, we were able to share it with the other Samaritan members, and was all taken care of, and it all turned out well. So I think that not having health insurance is the better way to do it. There's a little bit of paperwork involved. You cannot just ignore, like if you don't have health insurance and you had to go to the hospital and you've racked up some bill, the worst thing you can do is to just close your eyes and hope it'll go away. You do actually have to take the initiative to contact the doctors and the hospitals or whatever facilities, and to tell them, I don't have insurance, I'm self-pay, let's get this figured out. And even if you're dirt poor, even if you can only pay $5 a month, they cannot send it to collections. They cannot send it to collections as long as you make any effort whatsoever to pay. And they will just keep negotiating the price down with you. Like I said, one time a hospital, Dignity Health right here. I mean, they give us a 91% discount. It was like ridiculous. Like, really, guys? Like, wow. Because sometimes when you have a large family like ours, they're like, oh, well, you qualify for the hardship discount. So there's so many things, ways out that the hospital will just take your money. I mean, if they can get any money, they'd rather get that. And they would probably still end up getting more than they get out of the health insurance after having to pay for billing staff and things like that. So you don't want to ignore the bill from the hospital, because then it can go to collections and really mess you up. But as long as you're making an effort to pay, they will reduce the price, they will work with you. And even in the case of Boaz, I mean, he was born in May, May 6th. And the surgeries that I had with him were in the first week of December and in the third week of December. And by the time he was born in May, we had paid off all those bills. And part of it was because many people sent us money for about half of the bills. People sent us money, but that still left like a balance of about $20,000. But we had that paid off even before he was born, just because when you're not paying $1,500 a month premium to health insurance, and then on top of that have to pay the copay and the deductible, then you have more money to work with, and God can bless you in unexpected ways. But it still ended up being cheaper, even with that, than paying for, had we that year had health insurance and paid for the premium, and had we met the deductible, we still would have only broken even, because we still would have paid about $20,000 in premiums. And then our deductible would have been about $20,000. So even in a year like that, where we had such extraordinary bills, we would have still only broken even having insurance, let alone all the other years that we've saved ourselves tens of thousands of dollars. So don't be afraid not to have insurance. Don't let the high price of healthcare scare you off. Those are the insurance prices. You can educate yourself on Healthcare Blue Book and get an idea of what you might be looking at. You can go to GoodRx and get an idea, or you can even join a health sharing ministry such as Samaritan Ministries, and there are others out there. If that gives you peace of mind, or then at least you know what you're dealing with on a monthly basis, without it like it's just the same amount every month and you can budget on it. And you don't have to participate in the healthcare insurance scam where you end up paying more and getting less. And even to this day, now that Solomon has a job that offers health insurance, he continues to pay for Samaritan and to not use the health insurance through his job, even though for him it's paid for. Like, his health insurance would be free, but he continues to pay for Samaritan because he knows he gets better care with Samaritan, because he can go to a doctor in Utah to do a procedure that the health insurance would not have considered coverable, and he can get that taken care of, and he can have that continuity of coverage. That way he doesn't have a pre-existing condition with Samaritan. So even when he has the option to choose between both, he would rather pay to be uninsured or have a Medishare than to go through the commercial health insurance offered by his employer, which would only extend to him anyway. It's not like it would extend it once he gets married and has kids. You have to pay extra for your dependents. So anyway, if you have any questions, I'm going to look through the comments in the sidebar now. If you have any questions, if you wanted to leave those in there, I can get back to them. But I think I will make a separate video about the Stellgate ganglion block success story, just because it was such an answer to prayer, and I really think it could help other people dealing with that. I've read so much in other groups about it being successful. So when you see people that have a little ducky or a little egg next to their username, those are channel members. So it means that they can see these videos every week, and they can hatch from an egg to a chick to like all the sitting duckies. That's like the last stage of it. The one with the sunglasses, the one with the eggshell on its head is like the second last stage. So if you sign up as a channel member, you get that super cool. I'm just kidding. That super cool emoji next to your name. So, hi, Marina. But thank you for everybody who joined in here. Yep, Valerie, it's been an interesting week. Hi, I am from Indiana. It must be so cold over there. Eve, yes, I'm glad you caught the live too. Okay, so yes, a registered nurse, Polish nurse, Magda, no need for health insurance. Yes, because you make a payment plan. And that is true, they will make. You just end up, see, when you get health insurance, you end up paying for a lot of things that are for people that have other lifestyles, that are living in fornication, that are doing drugs, that are getting drunk. And that leads to a lot of health problems. Like another thing that I didn't mention, but you're not allowed to smoke, you're not allowed to drink, you're not allowed to use illicit drugs. So these are all things that lead to health problems down the road. So that's part of the reason why the Samaritan premium, it's not a premium, but the Samaritan share each month is about half as much as the share as a health insurance premium would be, even though it covers everything, which a health insurance premium doesn't do. So, yeah, so here it has the prices for the plan that we have. So this is the tier that Solomon is on because he's an individual. And for young adults, they charge less. And then for families, we have the largest size family. So we pay the highest tier. So this is our monthly share that we pay every month with Samaritan. Let's see here. Gerson therapy. Yes, Cass, and that, yes, I did lose my smell and taste for weeks, and then it came back distorted, but not being able to smell for over a year, I can't even imagine that. It is very seriously depressing. So, Susan and Sam, thank you for joining. I hope that this episode was helpful to you, even if you're from out of the country. If you have any questions, don't leave them in the chat there because that goes away after the video is gone. But once I hit end on this, it will then open it up in YouTube and you can leave a comment there. So if you would like to leave a comment on YouTube, if you have a question, I would appreciate that. And for those of you that are members, I hope to see you back here next Wednesday at 1:15 p.m. Thank you for joining.